Well, welcome to our virtual expert presentation for this evening, focused on women role models in agricultural leadership, education, and communications. Today we have Susie Whittington with The Ohio State University. Susie?
Hi, Teresa, and thank you. I appreciate being included among this esteemed group of colleagues that I consider to be trailblazers for women in agricultural education across the country. So thank you for including me and for thinking of me. The topic that I've chosen for today, after some conversation with Teresa, seemed to be one that is very fitting for women in teaching environments, especially like agricultural education departments and our sister departments by other names across the country, who are expected to be role models in teaching, because we're preparing teachers and extension educators and leaders in our communities. So the teaching expectation is very high. So the topic that I've chosen today is succeeding as a teacher in a research environment. And to set the stage, I'm going to have Teresa change to the next slide. I chose today to have this be a very conversational tone. I was told that all of you would be gathered around a table having lunch together or dinner together, and so I chose for it to be a very conversational tone. And so as we move through today, please interact with me as you would like to. You don't need to wait for me to finish. I also thought it would be more of a living room feeling, since I would be sitting in my office at my chair rather than up in front of you delivering a lecture. Just consider that I'm sitting beside you, and if a fireside chat is what might feel more comfortable to you, that's what I've chosen to kind of call this today. And I even purposefully chose a template for my PowerPoints that I thought would get us out away from the stuffy, researchy environment and into a little bit more of a fun, relaxing, conversational kind of fireside environment. So that's the approach that I'm going to be taking as we spend some time together today. Go ahead and change that, Teresa. I was real surprised when I was a faculty member at the University of Idaho that someone said to me one day when I had been nominated for a teaching award for our college that it would be the kiss of death to get a teaching award in a research environment. And as a brand new assistant professor who came into this profession because I was a teacher and had come through the system as a high school agricultural science teacher and thought teaching was my destiny and what I was called to do and to be, was a bit taken aback by someone insinuating that to be a great teacher is probably not going to get any kind of recognition in a university environment. And so I use that to kind of set our stage a little bit today, because it wouldn't surprise me if some of you have felt some of that in some of your environments as well. I would also share the other piece of my opening. You'll see the bullet there that I served on the College Promotion and Tenure Committee at the University of Idaho. Their College Promotion and Tenure Committee was about 20 or so people, and 3 of those seats were to be held by non-tenured faculty members. So I was appointed to serve a 3-year term as a second-year faculty member on the College Promotion and Tenure Committee. And that was ended up being a blessing to me, because it caused me to not ever be afraid of the system, because I had been behind it and had seen how it worked. However, it also caused me to have some insight going along with my kiss of death syndrome. It also gave me some insight into the fact that even though we are on we have a 3-way mission. We have research, teaching, and service in the land grant system. It also showed me that as a teacher, I was still expected, even if I was on 100% teaching, to have an extensive research record. But if I was a 100% research appointment, I wasn't expected to have a teaching record. And so it gave me a little bit of insight and a little bit of revelation into this whole system that I was engaging in and was going to spend my life in, and that I was clearly going to be a teacher figuring out how to succeed in a research environment. And so I hope that some of what I've learned across that 20 plus years can be insightful as we spend a little bit of time together today. Next slide, please, Teresa. My objectives then are pretty simple. And again, as a fireside chat, we're not going to get too complex and we're not going to get too researchy here at all. I'm just going to share a little bit about me, set a little bit of context, and help you know a little me a little bit better. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this campus culture that I really just kind of started explaining in my opening. And then just some ideas, and those will kind of be actually smattered throughout. So I don't know that these will be cookie cuttered and come out exactly as these 3 bits and pieces, but instead will be a little bit confettied across as I tell you a little bit about me, some of my thoughts on that campus culture and how I've seen it change. I'll give you a foreshadowing on that, and some of my ideas about how people have helped me, I think, be a researcher in this, be a teacher in this research environment. Teresa, you have a handout, so while the objectives are still up on the screen, go ahead and give them that handout that talks about awards and recognitions. What I want you to see there isn't, I didn't print this because I wanted you to look at the awards and the listing of awards. What I gave this to you for, and at this point in time in the topic we're discussing today, is to show you that even though I'm advocating for us to succeed as teachers, I have not been so naive as to think that I thought I could be successful in a Tier 1 flagship land-grant research institution environment without fully knowing the ground rules and the game I was playing and the expectations of me as a faculty member and what expectations that I would need to rise to or succeed or exceed. And so what I'm sharing with you is a little bit of what I hope will give me some credibility with you for delivering this topic on succeeding as a teacher in a research environment, because I think that list was the best way for me to show you that across my 20 plus years of work as a faculty member in this research environment, I've been able to, if we want to use awards as one way, one criterion to look at success and how some people might define that, even though there are many ways to define that, and we all personally define it in a lot of ways as well. It's one example, I think, to show some credibility for, I've still done excellent advising with my students as their academic advisor and as an advisor of undergraduate student organizations, and have been a researcher that's been recognized by my profession and by my institution, and I've been a teacher that's been able to also be recognized by my department, my college, my university, and with the USDA Teaching Award a few years ago. And so I only share that document with you as we open today to give a little credibility for my ability to be able to talk on this topic of succeeding as a teacher in a research environment, and that one cannot trump the other. We still have to package that together and exceed expectations in all 3 missions of the land-grant institution. So I just share that with you for that purpose as we get started today. Go ahead and change that, Teresa. I've chosen to pull a few lines out of an assignment that I do with my students. I teach a class called Toward Cultural Proficiency, and the first domain that we study is a self-introspection of my culture and where I come from as a way to begin then to look at the cultures of others and how we react when encountered by people that may or may not look like us. And one of the first assignments that we have to do in that class is to write a poem called I Am From. And so to set a little context and tell you a little bit about me, I just pulled 5 lines out of the poem that I wrote as part of the assignments for that class to just give you a little bit of insight into me and where I come from. And so these 5 lines are like this. I am from the 5th pew back on the left-hand side of the Harper United Methodist Church. I am from underneath the tiny even stitches of my grandmother's quilts, where my siblings and I often identified swatches of our homemade clothes. I am from both red and green tractors, whichever we could afford. I am from Ohio State football on crisp autumn Saturdays, viewed on a 19-inch black and white TV. I am from the middle of 5 children who squabbled much, loved each other always, and were always loved. So I just share that with you just to give you a little insight into me as we spend a little bit of time together and I tell you a little bit about my background. My background is, and you'll see there's a picture, my daughter got married in September and she was the second one to get married. Her sister was her matron of honor that's at her side right there, but that's my family. And I was sharing with Teresa that I don't know that I always balance work and family real well. On a daily basis, I probably don't do very well, but overall, at the big picture, I think we did okay most of the time. But my daughter got married on campus this fall, and so there's a picture of our family as we talk a little bit about my background. And go ahead and switch to that next slide, Teresa. There were 700 plus high school agricultural science teachers in Ohio, and I know that doesn't even come close to the number that are in Texas. So when you look at the size of our state, 700 plus was a significant number in the 1970s when I entered the teaching profession as a high school agricultural science teacher. I was a high school FFA member in the late 70s, where even though women were supposed to have been members of FFA chapters, it was not uncommon, and still, believe it or not, across this country, there are still high school agriculture programs that won't take women in their program. And so in the 70s, when we were just coming off of that vote to allow women, there just weren't a lot of women yet in high school FFA programs. And I wanted to be in that program because my brothers were. I had no idea that women weren't supposed to do that. At our house, the small farm where I was raised, there weren't men's jobs and women's jobs. There were farm jobs, and whoever was available did them. And so I thought that's how the world operated. So I had no idea I wasn't supposed to be a high school FFA member and ag student. And thank goodness for me, I had 4 men ag teachers who never told me that either. And rolled us right in, and we did everything everybody did. And I still am grateful to those men that I never knew that. And so it was my high school agriculture teacher who brought me to Ohio State one day. I'm a first-generation college student, so it was my high school agricultural science teacher that brought me to Ohio State and said, Susie, you need to be an ag teacher, and you need to go to Ohio State. And had no idea how to navigate those waters, and had parents that had no idea how to navigate those waters. And it was a high school agricultural science teacher that helped me do that. And some of you have those same stories, I know. So I was actually, when I entered teaching in 1978, I was the 6th female in Ohio, 700 agricultural science teacher. I was the 6th female to enter that profession in Ohio. And so when we talk about being pioneers in agricultural education, I had not thought of myself in that way until I was writing a thesis and said, oh my goodness, this is kind of novel. And was glad to have that, the help that I did in making that successful. My master's degree topic was actually funded by the Ohio Division of Sex Equity, was what it was called at that time, and I did a study of non-traditional genders in various occupations. And so at that time, the two that were most prevalent were any men who were in cosmetology programs, and any women who were in agriculture programs were kind of the standouts. And so it was all career tech ed, at that time vocational ed, it was all career tech ed, but those were the two that tended to have some non-traditional genders in their disciplines. So that was my thesis study in my graduate program. My PhD then became the topic that I then studied the next 20 years, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute when I get to balance. But my PhD topic was aspiring to teach at higher cognitive levels, and it was a research topic that dealt with classrooms, which I didn't realize at the time was going to also set me up well for being able to balance that research and teaching component, and that my research would be a piece of improving my practice. And so we'll talk about that some more when I get to that point. But that became my next 20 years of work, was what was going on in the brains of students as they sat in primarily college, but high school also, classrooms, and what were professors or teachers doing to engage students at higher cognitive levels during class sessions. I did that work at 3 universities. So I was fortunate when I left Ohio State. I had received all 3 of my degrees from here, which, going back to that kiss of death syndrome thing, all of us know you are never supposed to do that. But that's what worked for me at that time. I had a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old. My husband was a high school teacher and women's basketball coach in Central Ohio, and coached an AAU traveling basketball team. And so being in Columbus was what ended up working. I knew when I made the decision to get my 3rd degree from Ohio State that I was also making the decision that I would not be a faculty member at Ohio State anytime in my life. And so here I am. But that was not intended to happen. But probably what ended up allowing me to be able to come back here and do that was my first job out of here. I was at the University of Idaho. So I taught at the University of Idaho for 5 years. I went there as a 1-year visiting assistant professor, and Dr. Riesenberg began working to find a way to keep me in a tenure track position, and he did that. So, and then I was able to work at Penn State University. Thought that was going to be my last stop, that I was going to retire there. I was back to 6 hours from home, and happy to be there. Loved Penn State, and the opportunity for my husband and I to both come into Ohio State together, him in an assistant dean position in the dean's office, and me back in my home department. This is where I graduated from. Just worked out really well. And so, but I don't think it would have happened had I have not had those experiences at Idaho and Penn State that then allowed me to bring new perspectives back into Ohio State. So for the last 20 years of my life, I've spent studying cognition, and for the next 20 years of my life, what I would really like to do and am passionate about and have started working on is college access to Ohio Appalachian youth. And I've spent the last 3 spring breaks on alternative spring break chaperoning Ohio State students to Appalachian, Ohio, trying to work with 5th and 6th graders on planting some seeds that they can go to college, and it is possible, and that there are dollars to help them do that, and that academically they're capable. And so that's my, hopefully, the next 20 years of my life. I would like to try to make a difference for Appalachian youth in Ohio to have access to the Ohio State University. Go ahead and change that, Teresa, and we'll move into philosophy. And Teresa actually has another handout. There is a handout that has my teaching philosophy on a front and back page. And I thought that was important as well to kind of set this context for succeeding in a research environment, because I think it speaks to the fact that my heart is already pretty passionate about teaching, and so it's very easy to try to blend those together and have them work successfully for me. But I chose to build my philosophy around what many of us teach in our methods classes as the Rosenshine and First variables. And I know those are getting old. It's 1971. But until somebody gives me something simpler and better, I think it's worth talking about and hanging on to. So I built my teaching philosophy around that, and that's what you'll see on those pages in front of you. Rosenshine and First found in their research, it was a mega research from across the country, across disciplines, across age levels, that in classrooms where students were achieving at their highest levels, teachers tended to be doing these 5 things. Teachers tended to be clear. They tended to use a lot of variability or variety. They were enthusiastic about kids and about their subject. They were task-oriented and business-like, efficient and effective in using their classroom environment and their students' time, and conscientious of making that time worthwhile for the students, and that they gave students the chance to learn the material. And I divide that up in 2 different ways. One of them is, are there students with learning needs, and have I modified the learning so that all students get to learn the material? And the other way I look at it is, at the end of each class session, did I give them a chance to show me that they had learned the material? And if not, what do I do tomorrow to help make up for that, or to change that? And so that's a little bit about my philosophy of teaching, and I thought that was important, again, as we're telling a little bit about me and kind of setting that context for teaching in a research environment. Go ahead and change that slide, Teresa. I also wanted to share a little bit with you about the roles that I play, particularly at Ohio State, but I've tended to play these similar roles at all 3 institutions where I have been. But I serve as the undergrad coordinator for our department. And so I see every student that either transitions in or arrives to explore our department with their parents, or that has declared a major, either came in as what I call a true freshman. I call them true freshmen in red shirt, just like athletics. So if they come in as a true freshman, I get to meet them at orientation or at convocation. I also meet all of them as they transition from our regional campuses. Ohio State has 5 regional campuses, including our Agricultural Technical Institute. And that, given OSU's culture, that in 2015, our enrollment plan says that our average ACT for an entering freshman will be a 29. That means that our regional campuses are becoming more and more of a gateway where I am potentially getting a lot of my students. And so as they transition in, I'm the person that they meet with, and we look at their program and their transcripts, and then I assign their advisors. I also chair our teaching committee, and I think I've chaired that since 2000 when I arrived here, I think. I'm pretty sure. So I chair our teaching committee, which is also serves as our academic affairs committee. So any academic decisions or teaching decisions that are made in the department come through the committee that I chair. I also chair, we started a few years ago when we did a new program of activities or new strategic plan. Bob Birkenholtz came up with this concept that we would have self-populated research interest groups, thus the SPRIG. And in our department, the faculty met and through a brainstorming and consensus building activity came up with what the 4 self-populated research interest groups would be as a department collectively. And the one that I chair is the SPRIG on Teaching and Learning. And so that's also part of where my Appalachian passion lies, is with the group that's working in that SPRIG as well. So it becomes a nice departmental effort. as well. I also advise 2 undergraduate student organizations. I advise the Agricultural Education Society, which was formed in November 1882. So if you do the math, it's 131 years old. I tell the students it's older than the Michigan-Ohio State football rivalry. So that kind of gives them a little perspective. But we have had a rich tradition of a lot of pretty strong student leaders coming out of that student organization. And Dr. L.H. Newcomb advised it when I was an undergraduate, and I was president of that group when I was an undergraduate. But he was a great role model for advising an undergraduate student organization, and used that as a laboratory, a learning laboratory for developing high school agricultural science teachers to be good FFA advisors. And so we still use that philosophy for running that student organization, that we're the role model on campus for teaching students how to advise an undergraduate student organization. The other organization that I advise, I just started advising in about 2006 or 7. I advise a group that's university-wide called Ohio Staters Incorporated, and it is 36 students and 14 advisors. And the advisors come from all aspects of the university. So somebody in athletics, somebody in student life, somebody in FOD, somebody in all aspects of the university. So when these students come up with a project that they want to do to give back to the university or serve the student population, we can easily tap into a network that helps the students be able to get those projects proposed and funded and done. And so it's a great organization that their sole mission is to leave a legacy at Ohio State and to give back to the university, or to do the Woody Hayes Pay Forward thing. So it's just a wonderful group of students that are usually pretty wired into the entire university, so it wires in the advisors pretty quickly as well. So that's a little bit about some of the roles that I play that are above and beyond what you would expect me to say. Like I teach, I do research, and I do service. Go ahead to the next one, Teresa. And this one is talking about balance. And the way that I chose to package this was I wanted to share a little bit about what some, and this is where we kind of start blending those 3 objectives together, as I had shared with you before. So we'll tap into a little bit of the ideas, a little bit of the campus culture, kind of mixed together a little bit here. But I wanted to share with you some things that I learned from my previous department chairs, 3 of them, and I have had all tremendously fabulous department chairs. Dr. Riesenberg was my first one as a faculty member at the University of Idaho. Dr. Blaney Bowen was one of my department chairs at Penn State, and L.H. Newcomb was actually my mentor in my PhD program, but he came back and was our interim department chair for a couple of years, just in the past 3 or so years. And then I've had other great ones as well. Bob Birkenholtz was fabulous. But I wanted to share some of the things that they shared with me that I thought helped me get started and stay on track pretty well, that I'm hoping will be beneficial to you as well. Dr. Riesenberg, we always called him a gearhead because he came out of ag engineering. He was a great friend of Dr. Shin, and so that's a term that they always called each other, were gearheads out of ag engineering. But he really shed some light one time. At Idaho, we had to do our job descriptions, and every year you wrote your job description, and then that job description was a discussion with you and your department chair, and you signed off on it, and then it went to the associate dean, and the associate dean had to read your job description and also sign off on it. When you put together your P&T packet for that year, it became the first page of the tab under that year every year. So all of the documentation that went with it was documentation to support that job description that year. Well, in that job description, you had to put hours that you would be spending across teaching, research, and service, and you had to break those out. So what classes were being taught, what student organizations were you advising, etc. And Dr. Riesenberg, being a good statistics and a good crunch the numbers kind of a guy. I remember my first draft of it I gave to him, and he said, I don't remember exact numbers, but he said, "You mean to tell me you're spending whatever it was, 100 and plus days on advising the collegiate FFA or whatever those service things were?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." And he said, "Well, then we better straighten out these numbers." And so as he started massaging that and putting numbers on it, and then number of days attached to those hours, I went, "Oh my gosh, no, I can't afford to spend that many days doing that. How are we going to make this work?" And at that point, I was on a 25% research appointment through the Hatch Project. I still am. I still am on a 25% research appointment. And he said, "Susie, that's basically a day a week. One day a week, I don't want to see you here. You need to be doing your research." If it hadn't been for a gearhead number cruncher guy who was helping me take those numbers and put it into days and think differently about how I was spending my time, and then supporting me by telling me, "One day a week, I don't want to see you here. You need to get your research done," I don't think I would have gotten started well enough to have made that all work together and be as successful as it was. And it was really him that taught me that. And so I would just challenge all of you to think about that. And if you're not doing something like that, can you? And can you make that work? Where you just block out everything else, turn off the electronic gadgets which are consuming us these days, and just do your research work. The other thing that Dr. Riesenberg was always demanding about was document it. If it's not documented, you didn't do it. And it really started making you think way early, January 1 every year, where am I today? How am I spending my time? What's going into my Vita? What is it about this day and the time I'm spending that can be credited back some way to show my productivity and my efficiency and my effectiveness? And so he was real big on, if you didn't document it, you didn't do it. And if it's worth documenting, it ought to be contributing somewhere to what I'm paying you to do, your salary level and all of that. And I just really appreciated that. So he taught me a little bit about balance in some of those lessons. Go ahead and go to the next one. Dr. Blaney Bowen was really good at helping me to think about working smarter, not harder. And if you go to the next slide, Teresa, one of the things that he talked about is that obviously in the land grant mission and in our Tier 1 research institution, we really are expected to do a research, a teaching, and a service component to what we're all about. And Dr. Bowen's point was, the farther apart those circles are, the harder you're working, not the smarter you're working. And the idea is, how can you get those circles to begin to lay on top of each other as best they can? And when you can get those laying on top of each other, you're working smarter, not harder. Because now my research is informing my teaching. My teaching is what I can go use to go out to offer service to ag teachers or extension educators or whatever that might be. So how can you get those circles to lay on top of each other and work smarter, not harder? And so the next slide, Teresa, I just have 3 pretty quick examples of some of that. And one of them, and I'll just do these very, very briefly, but we did a bioproducts grant, and which is the research piece. You've got to have grantsmanship. We did a bioproducts in conjunction with our Ohio Bioproducts Innovation Center. And when I was asked to be on that grant, I said I will only do it if I can tie it into my methods class and tie it into what I'm working with my pre-service teachers. And so my pre-service teachers in their labs became the people who were writing the lesson plans that were going to be then put on the website and distributed for teaching bioproducts to the next generation of agriculturalists. And so that was a real good example of the grant, the work that I'm doing in classrooms and labs, the work that I'm doing when I go out to supervise those teachers out in high school classrooms, And then we actually pulled some of those really good ones in, and they and me did a workshop together for our Ohio Teachers Conference, which is this next one that I want to talk about again as well. So there was one example of a workshop we could do for the Ohio Teachers Conference. So my service piece in serving those Ohio teachers got tied right back into my research and got tied right back into what I was doing in methods class and out in high school classrooms. I also, at the Ohio Teachers Conference, I try for the sessions that I teach to be things that were part of my methods class, but maybe an advanced version of it, or sometimes a reminder because they've forgotten all about what Rosenshine and First was, or they've forgotten all about what the principles of teaching and learning were, or they've forgotten all about what the motivation factors were. And so sometimes they listen to it and are smiling and shaking their head as if it's brand new stuff when they had it when they were seniors. They've just forgotten all about some of the theoretical frameworks. And so I try to have that always be something that I can pull together pretty quickly, that's kind of in the back of my head, that can be some things they've forgotten and sounds new and refreshing to them again. And then I would also, on the practice, as I had mentioned earlier, my research has been in cognitive levels of teaching and learning. What are students and faculty doing in classrooms that engage students at higher cognitive levels? Every research project I've done has made my practice better. It's made my teaching better. It contributes to my research because of this line of inquiry. And so trying to make Dr. Bowen proud and how we can get those circles to lay on top of each other. And those are just some quick examples of that. Go to the next one, Teresa, on balance. And this, Dr. L.H. Newcomb, who was my major professor and then was our associate dean here for 17 years, and then returned as our department chair. And he was our department chair 20 years ago. He was our department chair when I was a graduate student. And I want to share the picture with you. Some of you might know who that is, some of you might not. That's Wilbert McKeechee. So McKeechee wrote the Teaching Tips books and the Teaching the College Freshman books, and I've cited and quoted and used his work so extensively, I may as well have been getting my picture with George Strait here, because I was so excited to get a picture with Wilbert McKeechee, but even though he is University of Michigan, but that's okay. But anyway, I talk about Dr. Newcomb and some of what he inspired me to think about that I hope can help you think about this as well. He actually funded, he was the endowed chair for the price funds in our college. And that was a endowment that was given to our college, and get this because I think this is really interesting, that was given to our college by a grandparent whose granddaughter got good advising from our college, and was so proud of the advising that she got here that they gave us several $1 million for the price chair in advising is the first word, advising, teaching, and learning in our college. Dr. Newcomb wanted a research component of that price chair and knew as associate dean he would not have time to conduct that research. So he carved out a piece of that money, and that's what he provided to me to be able to have a graduate student. So my last 3 PhD students have been funded through that that advising, teaching, and learning fund. And his belief in that, which I think is important and I wanted to share with you, was that we need to believe that a piece of our research is conducted so that it can inform our practice. And that is exactly then how I was able to use that funding in continuing that line of inquiry in cognitive levels and teaching and learning. So I was just blessed to be able to have those funds to be able to do that. He also was insistent that we not hodgepodge our research, which had been done in agricultural education for the first many years of its existence, and that we needed to carve out a line of inquiry where we could consistently contribute to something that would make us the expert. And so if you change that slide, Teresa, and you'll see this very hodgepodge, crazy looking matrix of stuff. And this is just kind of a fun little, my students keep tacking on a piece and it just keeps getting weirder and weirder, but it's kind of fun and makes me smile. This has been basically kind of my line of inquiry for the last 20 years. And so when graduate students come into my office to visit with me about what research project they might carve out, this is what I lay in front of them. And this is what we start talking about. I don't say, well, what do you want to do? I put this in front of them and say, my research is in cognitive levels of teaching and learning. We examine students and teachers in classroom environments to try to discover what it is that their brains are doing in classrooms and what we can do to help better engage those brains, and can we get them to retain information longer given the practices that we use, the activities that we use. What is it we can do to get them to retain information and then transfer that learning to other environments, either the processes or the content to other environments? That's what I'm studying. What piece of that do you think you would like to do with me? And so that has been that line of inquiry for 20 years. And so most of these pieces are filled in various ways, but like I said, it just makes me laugh and smile. So it's worth it on days when things get a little bit hectic. But a line of inquiry, and what can you do so that you continue to become the expert and people are coming to you to get your expertise. Go ahead and flip to the next one, Teresa. And this talks about campus culture. And again, not broken out in a cookie cutter, but just kind of hodgepodge together with some ideas, and we'll start trying to kind of wrap up some pieces here. But all of you well know that in our campus cultures, our PhDs, going back to my discussion with them on their line of inquiry, often come to us and just say, I don't know what I want to study. What should I study? They're looking for something. And to the extent that we can guide and direct that to our lines of inquiry and fit what they want to do in their career objectives as well, we can be beneficial to both them and to us in carving out our research programs. I gave Teresa a handout that shows my research, and again, my point on that is to share with you that as you read down through that, you will see very clearly a theme that guides through all of that. Now, you'll also notice not every single study was related to that necessarily. And for all of the reasons that you already all are aware of, funding came from somewhere for something, and so we do this little sidebar project, or a student's background lends itself so significantly to something, and where they want to take that lends itself so well to something that we carve out a project that's uniquely fit to them. So we do that for lots of different reasons. But overall, you will see in that listing that there is clearly a theme that goes through that on cognitive levels of teaching and learning. And again, that always helps inform my methods courses. So let's talk about this methods course for just a minute. We have a methods course on our, well, I teach a methods course to our pre-service teachers, but Dr. Newcomb, our associate dean, and then our current associate dean for several years have taught a college teaching class. And that class is for PhD students from across all disciplines who are going to be faculty members at universities. That usually had run somewhere around 15 or so students. They teach it once a year, 15 or so students in that course. Going back to campus culture, our university made a change in our degree requirements for PhDs, where post comprehensive exam, students can now only be enrolled in 3 credit hours. That caused that course to just fall off the face of the map. Advisors would not put their students in that course because what had happened before was they would finish all of their coursework, start on their research, Now they have time in the minds of the advisors. Now you have time to go pick up a class about teaching. And so when they put that 3 hours on, that became their research 3 hours post-candidacy, and you have to petition now with a letter if you want to take more than 3 credit hours. And so that course was not offered last fall for the first time. And so when we're talking about this culture of teaching on our campuses, and we can't even get our PhD students who are going to go into universities to be professors to even advise them into a teaching class, it tells you what kind of a stream we're fighting against as we're moving upstream in trying to advocate for being excellent teachers in this research environment. It's not made up, it's real. And it starts as early as trying to get a teaching methods class into the curriculum of our PhD students who are going to be the next generation of teachers at the university. The red apple thing. Dr. Newcomb used to say to my PhD students, quit polishing that red apple. We bring students in here to do PhDs because they're already great teachers. They wouldn't be a PhD in our department if they weren't a great teacher. But that's where they want to spend all of their energy, all of their time, all of their creative juices, is time at the copier running that one last more color printed thing that they can bind into this little document that's going to be so cool when they hand it out in class tomorrow and have the students sharing their little passport activity or whatever it is. And Dr. Newcomb would say, quit polishing that red apple. You are a great teacher or you wouldn't be here. The time that you're spending here, you've got to learn to be a great researcher. And so it built a philosophy or a culture in our department on this campus for, I know you're a great teacher, but during the 3 years that I have you, I've got to teach you to be a great researcher so that you can have the balance you need to go out and be successful in these research environments. Your teaching is going to sustain itself. You are great or you wouldn't be here. And so trying to help them figure that out. Now, the red apple that I would try to convince them that they were polishing, the piece of that red apple is that next bullet, which is their scholarship. When you leave here, I don't care if you've developed more tactical kinds of efforts or more logistics kinds of efforts in your teaching. The piece of that apple you're going to polish while you're with me is that scholarly component of your teaching. What are the theoretical frameworks? What does the literature say? Who's writing about teaching? Do you agree with them or do you not? Why are you doing some of the things the way you're doing it? Why do those things work in a classroom? And what can you be studying and researching about that contributes to the body of knowledge in teaching and learning? And so they still do get to polish a little, but I want them to think about polishing it differently and adding that depth to their teaching and the scholarship of teaching. I would also share with you that on this campus there was a culture of, again, trying to get good first-year professors to be great teachers. And so our associate deans have always run brown bag seminars, lunchtime seminars for brand new assistant professors coming into our campus, into our college. And those brown bag seminars were on things, again, like I teach in my methods class, building an effective syllabus, writing an effective assessment, writing learning objectives that engage learners at higher cognitive levels. The topics were very familiar to all of us that come out of teaching departments, but they aren't familiar to renowned researchers coming in as from postdocs into a faculty setting whose advisor, remember, never put them in that college teaching class that we talked about earlier. And so they are trying to establish that culture for teaching. All of our people that come in to interview for jobs now have to teach a session while they're on campus, which didn't used to happen years ago. I would also say that in my research, I've noticed as I go into college classrooms, our college classrooms now have a higher engagement level in the classrooms I'm visiting than what they did in 1987 when I collected my first data on my cognitive classroom engagement. much. We have come a long way, but it's taken us, do the math, what's that come out to be, about 25 or 30 years, I don't know, to get us there. But they say it takes a decade to change a culture, and in this case with this big ship it probably takes a little longer than that, but we are seeing some change in that. I share a story with you about Teach for America. I always say it, we take 4 years to develop a good pre-service teacher and get them ready through student teaching, all of the feedback we've given, all the labs they've had, the early field experience feedback, all that we put into them. And yet I had a girl in my Ohio State or student organization that got a job in Phoenix as Teach for America. And I saw her after she had been there 3 weeks, and she was home on campus for an event, and she broke down and cried, and she said, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to get this done. And I thought, here's this 22-year-old girl who I spent 4 years getting my students ready to go out. They had spent 4 weeks with her, put her in her classroom, and 3 weeks later she's crying and going, I don't know how to do this. And the thought that went through my head, silly me, was that, well, our professors don't break down and cry, but could they if it was acceptable in our culture to do that? The same thing just happened to them. They came in and got put in a classroom without any kind of preparation, and yet they're not going to come to somebody and say, I need some help. They're not going to break down and cry, but how can we be available? And so I think some of those brown bag topics are a good example of that. And I'll share with you that as I do my research out in these classrooms and professors build a relationship with me, they will call me time and time again and ask me, would you come over and watch me do such and such today? I'm going to try this and I want your feedback. They'll send me their syllabus and say, would you look at my syllabus? I'm having trouble with whatever. Do you think those are the right point values? Because they build a relationship with me. And I'm going to get to that, pick up on that point again as I close here in just a few minutes. I would also, as all of you know, in grants right now, we are having opportunities for that educational component to be there. And it really behooves us not to sit back and have them find us, but us step up to the plate and ask them, can I offer a way to have that educational component come to life on that grant? The one that I'm most excited about right now is I did one with vet medicine on Ohio organic dairy farmers, where I would be teaching the workshops with the farmers on these new techniques that Vet Med is implementing that are a go green way to dry off dairy cattle. I think that's exciting, and my teaching life can come full circle with my former dairy farmer life where I was raised, and I'm excited about that project. Go ahead and flip that slide, Teresa. So just a few ideas as we wrap up. Percent of my time that I spend on teaching as opposed to research, I really try to spend 1 day a week at home concentrating just on my research work. I still will do some email if it looks like something that needs addressed right away. If not, I think it can probably wait 24 hours until I get to it the next day. I don't think we need to feel like we have to respond to an email in 5 minutes. I think there's time that I have to put my brain around my research work. I'm a real extrovert, and I can't do that in my office because I've already established a culture here where I have an open door, and I'm the undergrad coordinator. I advise 2 student organizations. It is a whirlwind in and out of this office, and I'm not going to be able to get that done. So the percent of my time, I'm on a 25% research appointment. 1 day a week, I need to commit to that and try to get that done. I think it's important that we think about classroom research. How can I use my classroom as a place where I can collect data? And incidentally, if it's in your classroom, it doesn't have to go through IRB unless you're going to publish it. But most of us want to publish it, so we'll probably have to go through IRB. But how can I use my classroom as a place where I can get a publication, but also be able to improve my practice in whatever ways that might be? I also would recommend NACTA as an organization if some of you are not members of that, because they really concentrate on the art and science of teaching. And it's a great group of people who love teaching. And what we can bring to the table out of our teaching departments, they absolutely love, because they're those researchers out there who are looking for good teaching practices. And so we have a gift that we can offer there. Go ahead and change that one more. And I would entertain and take any questions that any of you might have for me at this time.
Susie, thank you so much. And one of the things that you shared that I found very interesting and very something I think we should all take a look at is having that line of inquiry with the blanks visible. I think that that gives students something to look at when you are trying to engage in that advising process. So I enjoyed those empty blanks. So often we try to fill everything up and fill in all the blanks, and I kind of enjoyed seeing those empty blanks in terms of, okay, so where do you fit in this picture? And again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom about engaging that teaching with the research throughout the career. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa.